Check the description for the following discount codes. Now, PXN are not new to sim racing. In fact, they're not even a new company. They've been producing sim racing wheels, sort of the equivalent to the Logitech G range, for example, for quite some time. And I've reviewed a couple of those, and typically they fall a little bit short of the equivalent Logitech or Thrustmaster, always for slightly less money as well. They also do controllers, headsets, all sorts of other gaming type peripherals. This is, I was about to say it's their first sort of entrance into direct drive, but it isn't, because they did a V99 or something along those lines. I never got to review one, but anyway, what we're looking at today is the VD6, and this is the middle of their new range of direct drive wheelbases. They do a VD4, a VD6 and a VD10, and that all relates to the torque of each of the direct drive wheelbases. So the VD6 peaks at 7 Newton meters, holds at 6, the 4 peaks at 5, holds at 4, the 10 peaks at 12 and holds at 10, at least according to their specifications. Now they also say, as far as specifications go, that we've got a 24-bit encoder, which will give us a resolution, as in one complete rotation, 360 degrees, would be split into 16.7 million points. So that's plenty of points of resolution for accuracy. They say it is a 20-pole low inertia servo motor. I'm not a servo motor expert. If that means something to you, then perhaps it does. To me, it means next to nothing. But that's what they say it is. Now, the power supply for this, I believe, is 24 volts, and it runs at 24 volts and puts out 90 watts or 3.75 amps. So this isn't, it's not a huge power supply. And actually, talking of the power supply, they could do, you probably won't be able to tell this, but the cable is actually quite short. It could have done with being just a little bit longer. Because when I had this plugged into the wall and then set up on my sim rig down in the front room, it only just reached to the wheelbase itself. So we've got a nice quick release mechanism on here, which we've seen on many different direct drive wheelbases, and then obviously the contact points there that then connect to the back of the wheel using pogo pins, and this is your quick release here. It simply slots on. Once it's lined up, it just plonks on like that, and then you grab it and you just pop it off like that. So that's pretty quick and easy. And there's no real sort of flex or wobble in this. Get in the right place. There we go. Yeah, there's no real flex or wobble in this quick release. As I say, it is tried and tested, so it's nothing new there, and they've implemented it just as well as any other manufacturer has. So certainly no complaints with a quick release there. It comes off just like that, no problem. We'll look at the wheel in a minute. There's a few different wheels to choose from. But first of all, we're looking at this wheelbase. Now, it is made of aluminium construction, and I think these front bits here, even though they're kind of carbon-esque, I think they're actually just plastic, and the same for the back. And there's a feeling of sort of plastickiness about it, and it's kind of the best way to describe this as an overall description is that it just feels a little bit cheaper than, say, the Moser R5 or the Fanatec CSL DD. And that's what this is designed to compete with. Moser R5, CSL DD. They're all around 5-6 Newton meters. The CSL DD goes up to 8 with a bigger power supply, but you can buy it in the 5 Newton meter format. So that's what it's designed to compete with. In fact, there's one here for a size comparison. Just, you might be interested to see that, if I can kind of hold them both up. So you can see the CSL DD is quite a bit chunkier, but as I say, this does of course go up to 8 Newton meters with the bigger power supply, whereas this one does not. But it's still reasonably heavy, still a fair lump for its size and its output. As far as price point goes, I've got early pricing here. The official release price at the time of recording hasn't been announced. So what I've been given, they make a point of saying is a preliminary price. So it's roughly, they do a few different bundles, but the wheelbase on its own is €339. But they offer a variety of bundles, so that will include a steering wheel and their pedals as well. And they vary from 350 to €400, and that's bang on in line with the Moser R5 bundle and the various bundles you can get from Fanatec as well for their CSL-DD. Somewhere they all range between 350 and sort of €400. So it's priced appropriately for its power output. Now, aside from, as I say, just a slight feeling of sort of cheapness as far as the materials go, you know, I think it actually doesn't look like a bad little bass, and the way they've got the various ports at the back all nicely marked up for you, and the use of USB-C, of course, is there, you know, and as you can see, there's shifter, pedals, emergency stop, the power in, one labelled extra for whatever that might be, and then a USB-A as well. So there's potential there for other accessories, shifters, handbrakes, what have you. It's it doesn't look like a bad little wheelbase, and the packaging, for those of you that are interested in the packaging, looks like this. The packaging is actually quite decent, both the box and the sort of foam used inside. So the presentation of this is actually half decent as well. So there's your pricing, sort of 350 to 400. So it does compare with the other manufacturers like they're aiming to. It's 6 Newton meters, peaks at 7, and I've been through the resolution, 24-bit, 16.7 million points, and the fact that it's a low inertia 20-pole motor. Now, when I turn this by hand, I can feel what we describe as cogging, even though there are no cogs. We can feel the motor, and I think it's the feeling of it just going from magnet to magnet as it goes around inside its housing. Once it's powered up, that does disappear. Just like with the old DD1 and DD2 from Fanatec, you used to feel, well, again, we call it cogging, but it isn't, because there's no gears. But once you'd fired it up, it was actually smooth in use and you didn't feel it. And the same applies to this. I'll put some footage up of me driving. Now, I had a good session with this just to try and get the feel of it, have a little play with some of the tuning options. There's PC software and there's an app that does basically the same thing for your phone, whether it's iOS or Android, and I'll show you the PC software briefly in a minute after this segment. But once I was driving it, it did feel nice and smooth. That sort of cogging effect disappeared. But the overall experience, I'm going to liken this to the early Moser experience. I was sent out for review, Moser pedals and wheelbase, right at the very beginning, right when they were sending out things that were almost unfinished. And both myself and Will at Boosted Media were like, these really shouldn't have been sent out for review. They weren't ready. I had sharp edges and things that actually cut me during a review on one of their sets of pedals. And nothing was quite ready really for production or for final review. And I get a similar feeling with this, because the basics are there, right? There's a decently strong motor that does feel smooth in its operation, and it's got a good resolution, and there's the option there to plug in your various accessories, and there's a few different wheels available. But driving just feels a little, it's not polished enough. The experience is a little bit rough and ready, is a good way of describing it. It's like, yes, all the sort of detail and the feedback and, you know, the road texture going over, you know, rumble strips and curbs, and you can feel when you lose traction, and you can catch the slide, and all those things are there as you would expect from any wheelbase really these days. But it's not very refined. It's a bit of a rough and ready experience, and at some points even it almost feels like that there's a vibration from the wheelbase that's a little bit rough, is probably the best way of describing it. It's kind of hard to put across in words, but like the overall experience, just a little bit. It needs polishing. It needs some refinement. And again, I think this is how sort of the Moser experience was, you know, back in their early days. So it might just be a case of, you know, a few software revisions and some firmware updates. And of course, I did update to the latest firmware and the latest software for the review. And we might find that these are actually a reasonably, you know, competitive alternative to the likes of the Moser R5 or the Fanatec CSL-DD. But, you know, whilst I sort of enjoyed my time testing this and racing with it, I just felt it was just, yeah, the experience just wasn't as polished as it could be. Things were almost a little bit too on and off, you might say, as far as the force feedback goes. Like I say, I don't think I was missing anything, but it's just like transitioning from, you know, smooth feedback to, you know, a rumble strip, or to, you know, some rough texture on the road, or you know, bumping into a car even, and the transition wasn't as smooth as it is on other wheelbases. It was a little bit like on and off. It's kind of hard to describe, but like I say, the best way to summarize it is just to say that the force feedback needs some more polish, just to make it a little bit of a nicer experience. Certainly the strength of this at 6 Newton meters, I would say, compares to the CSL-DD without, you know, running the 8 Newton meter boost pack. So I wouldn't question the torque output. I didn't have it overheat or throttle back on its output during my testing, so no real issues there, you know, in the period of time that I tested it. Obviously, if you ran it for 8 hours straight, I can't tell you whether it would, you know, get too warm or not. I didn't test it for that long a session, but yeah, that's the best way to describe this wheelbase. Is I think that the presentation of it and the build quality feels decent, if just a little plasticky with these front and back bits here. Now, it's not like there's anything wrong with using plastic at the back and the front. You know, other wheelbases will have metal plates, or even carbon fibre plates. There's nothing wrong with plastic. It's not structural. It doesn't detract from the way that the wheel operates in any way. It's just, it gives you that feeling of, oh, they've saved a little bit of money, and it doesn't feel quite as premium as perhaps it could. But it isn't, you know, it isn't mega price. 339 euros, the information I've got for just the wheelbase, is on the cheaper end for a 6 Newton meter wheelbase. So whether I can, I think I would probably recommend going with Fanatec or Moser at the moment, just because it isn't as refined as perhaps they are, or as mature, certainly not as mature, but it may be that it comes, you know, further down the line, is the best way to describe my experience with this at the moment. So that's the wheelbase. Now let's have a look at the steering wheel, and then finally I'll show you the software. The steering wheel, unfortunately, very much does feel cheap. And there's a fair bit of flex in the wheel, and the buttons do feel very plasticky. As I say, quick release works fine, no issues with that whatsoever. Decent quick release, no real play. They call this ultra fibre leather. I'm guessing it's just some sort of thin synthetic plastic, because I don't know, it almost smells leathery, but it doesn't really feel it. But yeah, when this was attached to the wheelbase, I should have got some footage, but I didn't. You can flex it forward and backward a fair bit at the top here. So it's actually the wheel that flexes, not like the quick release or anything like that. And this very much, you know, these buttons on here, you can see they stick out a fair way. They feel quite cheap. They're not the worst I've felt. Oh, what was that wheelbase I reviewed that felt absolutely terrible? Oh, it escapes me now. There was one I reviewed and the buttons were literally the worst I've ever felt. These are definitely not the worst I've ever felt. They're what I would call, you know, cheaper, but they're okay. And the same goes for these rotaries. These actually feel fairly smooth, they just don't have a lot of weight to them. There's no real play in them, in or out or side to side. So the operation is smooth and solid. It's just they haven't got much heft to them like the more expensive steering wheels would have. And the paddles, we've got magnetic Hall effect paddles and we've got analog paddles as well on this particular wheel. Did I tell you what this wheel was? It's the WDS R2. So yeah, we've got, and the tension on these is quite nice. And there is a little bit of adjustment on those screws there. You would undo them, you can move the paddles in and out. But what I don't like about these paddles is the travel. It doesn't look very far, like on camera, but in use, I was like, oh, these paddles are moving way further than I would like. So I would like a little bit less travel on the pad. It's weird because looking at it on camera, which I haven't obviously done before, it doesn't look like they go very far, but in use, I really felt like I was, you know, stretching my fingers quite a distance. I mean, it may even be actually that it's not perhaps the travel that bothers me. It might be the distance between the back of the wheel and the paddle itself. So this gap here, they're quite a way back from the wheel. If they were here, then the travel could stay the same and my fingers wouldn't be as outstretched. I think maybe that's what it is. Because yeah, the travel actually isn't that far. They're just a really long way away from the back of the wheel. I mean, if you look how far they move, we could move those paddles like to here and they'd still clear the back of the wheel. So I think perhaps that's what it is actually. It's not the travel, it's how far away they are from the back of the wheel, and that my fingers, as you can see, are quite far outstretched. So yeah, I didn't really like the paddles because of that. There's no obvious way to adjust them. There is only the paddle sort of in and out that you can adjust there. They don't come off like the Acertec ones do, for example, so you can swap them for other ones or put them in different places. But that's to be expected because this is much cheaper stuff. Now, I don't actually have a price for this wheel. My pre-release information doesn't include it. It only includes prices for the wheelbase and the bundles. And like I said, the wheelbase $339 and bundles that include various wheels, there's 3 to choose from, and pedals vary from, you know, $339 up to sort of $469 is the most expensive one there, and that includes a shifter as well, I think. So, and we've got this little LED indicator up here. In fact, I'll put a little video up now of me just giving a close-up of this all installed on my rig so you can see what it looks like fitted and all together in situ, and you'll see how that looks illuminated. The PXN logo in the middle of the steering wheel is also a button as well. So in total buttons we've got 3, 6, 9, 10. We've got 13 buttons and then like a 4-way funky that also depresses, and then we've got 2 rotaries as well. And as I say, whilst they do feel on the cheaper end, they certainly don't feel as bad as some others that I've felt. Now the stitching on the steering wheel actually looks pretty decent. I don't know how well we'll get this to show up on camera, but the stitching actually looks quite good. There's no sort of raggedy edges, there's no loose bits of thread anywhere. It actually looks pretty good. Actually, tell a lie, looking at this piece at the bottom here, that isn't the I don't know whether you'll see it, but that isn't the tidiest of stitching along the bottom there. But again, this is cheap sim racing equipment. This steering wheel, like I said, I don't have prices for it, but I would be surprised if it's more than 150 to 180 pounds, you know, when we can pay 800 pounds for a steering wheel. So we can't complain too much. It's 300mm in diameter, so just shy of 12 inches. I think that's also the same size as a Logitech G steering wheel. So it's ample, it's neither big nor small. And it's obviously it's a D shape. You have got a choice. They do offer 2 other round wheels, so if you wanted one for drifting or rally, for example, you wouldn't choose the D-shaped wheel. You'd choose their WAS steering wheel or their WCS R2 steering wheel. They're both round wheels. And actually, interestingly, the WAS is an inch smaller in diameter, and the WCS is an inch bigger in diameter. But you can look on the website and see those as and when they pop up. But yeah, so that's my thoughts on the wheel. This definitely feels that it's more entry level than perhaps what the wheelbase does. But everything does function okay, and it doesn't feel too bad in the hand to use either. So finally, let's have a little look at the software. This is the PXN sim racing software. We've got the home here, you've got a news feed, you've got game launcher, driver license, and then some basic steering wheel adjustments. For the wheelbase there, the force feedback shows you what wheel you have, and then there's handbrake, shifter and pedals should you have them installed as well, which of course I don't. You can adjust the steering angle and you can center it. This is the force feedback adjustment page. So force feedback strength itself, mechanical torque, mechanical inertia, mechanical friction, mechanical damping, lock angle, it shows you the temperature of the steering wheel. Again, you can center it, everything you would expect to find. This is your steering wheel page where you can test all your individual inputs and you can make some adjustments to the LEDs. And should you have pedals, handbrake and shifter, they'd be there as well. The games tab, software update tab, both these firmwares are up to date. And then we've got the help page, which links you to YouTube, and then the settings page for the app itself, launch on startup, etc. So that software itself isn't actually that bad. It's relatively well polished, considering I was saying, my main sort of complaint about this is that it isn't as polished or refined, the force feedback, as perhaps what it could be. Without being, a motor engineer, I couldn't tell you whether it's the motor that prevents it feeling as polished as a Moza R5 or the Fanatec CSL DD, or whether it's just the software. Hopefully it's just the software, and as time goes on, like with the Moza stuff, it gets better and the performance improves down the line with some refinement and some polish. So if I have links for these, I will provide them in the description. Currently at the time of recording, they're not available to buy, so I can't. But presumably when this comes to launch, which I believe should be the 25th of July, and that should be today, there'll be a link should you want to pick one up. As I say, a recommendation, looking at the price of a bundle, from PXN, a bundle from Fanatec, a bundle from Moza, my recommendation right now would still be to go with Fanatec or Moza, just because the experience is a bit more refined and a bit more polished. But it's still always great to see, competition in the space, and priced respectively as well. The more competition we have, the more competitive pricing becomes and the more options we have. Although sometimes to the point of saturation where it's almost impossible to choose from one another. At the high end, when it comes to direct drive wheelbases, the top end stuff from all the manufacturers pretty much performed the same, and there's very little in it. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see how PXN evolve their software over time and their physical lineup of products as well. Anyway, as always, thank you very much for watching, and take it easy.